this is the outline of our presentation. The IT is implementation research.
Why is it needed? I'm sure you all have lots of opinions on that. What is implementation research? Who should be involved? What approaches and methods are useful and challenges introduced? So if you come to why is it needed, I guess I don't have to say this, but it helps us to improve understanding of barriers and facilitating factors. And I think generally when one talks of implementation research, we always think about scaling up. It's generally, okay, we have a pilot now and how do we move to scaling up? So it helps us to move from the phase of innovation to scale up into large scale systems. It could be public health systems, it could be the private sector, it could be NGOs. It helps us to study contextual and outcome variations of the same intervention. So what in context A, you have a certain set of outcomes and processes, and would that be replicated in context B? How much would it differ? What adjustments would we need to make? All of those answers are answered by implementation research. It also helps make implementation more effective. So from not so great to good, but from good to even better. So all of those are why we need to do implementation research. Okay? One of the things about large-scale system research is to figure out what lessons can be learned from other initiatives to introduce and scale up the same innovation in another area. It could also look at how will key stakeholders be affected. What changes do you need to make within organizations to enable either transferring the pilot or to scale up the pilot? So all of those questions answered by implementation research. Does anybody have a point to make? Anything different? Any other reasons why you would want to do implementation research? No? Right one? Okay. So what is implementation research? Part of it, I think when Prashant spoke about realist, I realized a lot of not just what is working and what isn't, but also why and how. Why things are going wrong, of course, but also why things are going right in the particular context, because that gives us a lot of information. And how do you test approaches to improve it? I must say to you that a substantial part of this presentation was drawn from a book called the WHO Implementation Research Guide by Peters et al., which is really a fantastic synopsis of all of implementation research. Of course, you need to read a lot more, but I think that gives you a fairly good synopsis and idea of what it is. Now, the second way of defining implementation research is what is happening in the design of the program, in the implementation. Very often when we think about implementation, we always say, oh, things are failing. Why? Because implementation is a failure. But I think we don't often go back to look and say, was the design a flaw? And quite a bit, quite a few times, it's design that's the problem, not really the implementation of it. Because implementation relies on policy and design. But if the design was problematic, then there's going to be a problem. So studying the design, the implementation, the way the pilot is administered or the intervention is administered, operations, services, and outcomes. And then what is expected or desired, and why is it happening as it is? And now for those who say that it's not scientific enough, there's another definition somewhere that I found that says it's a scientific inquiry into implementation strategies, processes, and outcomes. So to satisfy, because too often, I've encountered this, is that implementation research is seen as a step down to scientific research and inquiry. And that, I think, is problematic because it pits two groups against each other. As though scientific research, biomedical research is all just much more glamorous and implementation research is your how to do stuff. It isn't. It's just a different way of looking at things. What is intervention research to continue? The thing with this intervention research is this definition allows us a multi-dimensional perspective, and that's really a problem because it's not very clearly defined. It draws from different disciplines, it can ask different questions, and that's actually the devil of it, is that nobody can say it's a clearly defined science in that sense, although there is an implementation science, but implementation research, and that's why perhaps it's conjectured that it doesn't get enough attention, it doesn't get enough funding, because it's seen as a mongrel, if you will, drawing from different disciplines. Okay? Now, in terms of implementation strategies, so when we think of implementation research, we could look at implementation strategies, we look at implementation processes, and we look at implementation outcomes. So when we talk about strategies, it's useful to think about strategies as being attributed to different actors. So you have on one level government that makes policy and finance decisions. So you could look at implementation research from that angle. Those are the strategies that big, policy level, finance level, looking at public-private partnerships which are designed at that level. The second is looking at like the actual implementation or service organization, so district level planning, human resource strategies. Those are all very specific to the second level of implementation. The third could be individual behaviors, why do people behave like they do. It could be individual providers. It could be capacity building, peer learning, and then finally household and community level. So you can have implementation strategies at different levels of the system. Then you also could study processes and outcomes. So processes would be change management, looking at institutional dynamics, looking at institutional frameworks, how do institutions behave, the mandates of institutions. Okay, and in terms of outcomes. Now when you think about outcomes, can somebody give me examples of implementation outcomes? Yes, coverage, maternal mortality is an impact. Anything else?
Institutional readiness. Number of institutional, percentage of institutional.
Right. So that's coverage with institutional outcomes. Then?
Change in knowledge.
Yes.
Number of people immunized.
Sorry?
Number of children coverage.
Coverage. Sorry?
Behavior modification.
Yes, true. So there's also acceptability of an intervention. How acceptable is it to people? That's an outcome. How can you adopt an intervention? That's also an outcome. I mean, if it's an intervention that relies on heavy, intensive processes, it's hard to adapt it into a large-scale system. And that's one outcome of an intervention. There's also something we call fidelity, and Prasanna will speak about it later. Whether you take an intervention and use the same parameters that you've used, and so that means high implementation fidelity, but whether that high implementation fidelity works in another context, it's also an outcome. I'd like to, so there's one thing that in this book we keep talking about, and I've read it in other implementation research, is about applying it to the real world. And I really have a problem with that, because it somehow implies that the pilot or the model or the innovation is not a real world thing, which is a bit unfair, especially if you look at our context in India, where several innovations are piloted by NGOs. And then I think when they start the pilot, they look at the pilot very specifically as based on the needs of their particular population. So if they're operating in a 15,000 population with high infant mortality, they design a model that's suited to their. That's not an unreal world. But to talk of implementation research is moving something from a pilot or a small-scale model into the real world is, I think, is a bit problematic. And I wish somebody would go back and question that. And sort of, we have to come to terms with it. It's not an unreal world. That's a real world as much as this is a real world. It's just a much bigger world, maybe. That's the difference. And then at the other, you look at this. Think of IR as a continuum. From implementation light and implementation heavy. And I think that's a better way of defining unreal world to real world, is because if you look at implementation in a continuum, so there's first an innovation, which is very process intensive, targeted towards a specific outcome, and is implemented in a small population. For that, you don't need too much implementation research, because you're too busy trying to even establish the evidence whether that intervention actually has evidence. So it's much more focused on trying to look at the processes and trying to look at the evidence that you're going to get to make sure that that is an effective implementation. You move on to a second stage, which is you move to a slightly different context. You take that same model and you apply it in different contexts. And there you have to do a little more implementation research. And finally, it's when you move it into a large-scale system like a public health system. And then it becomes really implementation heavy, because you have to apply all of the principles of implementation research. Can anyone give me an example? Anyone from your experience of moving from a small-scale pilot into a large system?
Like SNCUs were earlier in a small, in a couple of states, and now we've made it into a national program, or maybe national nutritional rehabilitation center in our states, which are now.
Recently was piloted, started in small pilot.
ASHA program also got started.
Yeah, well, ASHA program is small-scale community health workers moving into the large-scale system. But I'd like to give you a very specific instance of one part of the ASHA program, which was home-based newborn care. And home-based newborn care was piloted first in Gadchiroli, the model that we currently have. Home-based newborn care has been done in many places in very, very different ways. But this particular particular model of home-based newborn care was piloted first in 30 villages, proved that it reduced neonatal mortality by 50%, then moved to several sites in Maharashtra by very similar implementing agencies, which is NGOs, demonstrated about 40% reduction, not the 50% that they got in Gadchiroli, slightly less. Then they moved to 5 state-led pilots, which was through the government system, through Anganwadis, through community health workers, and through ANMs. And then finally it got scaled up over this took about 15 years. And that's when I was very clearly able to see how the early one was not implementation heavy as the last one version is, which is the ASHA implementation. ASHA is now implementing home-based newborn care, and along the way, of course, the model has had many adaptations, many changes, because that's what you need to do when you move a model from a pilot stage into a large-scale system. And actually, that's implementation study, because you look at what processes you need to drop, what you need to add in order to move it into a large-scale system. And that's where we look at implementation research as a continuum. Clear? Now, who should be involved in implementation research? This is really a very complex thing, because I think practitioners see implementation research, or implementers see implementation research as their domain, because for the questions, we rely on implementers. They are the ones who are day in and day out implementing the program. They know what they want answered, right? But to help us answer these questions, we need support from researchers. And therefore, there's always this challenge of there is collaboration, and collaboration is challenging. And partnerships have to be built and partnerships have to be maintained, but there's always a challenge. You also have to have commonality between agenda. Why are we doing this implementation research? Is it for somebody to be able to publish papers? Is it for me to improve my program? Or can we meet both aims? But that agenda has to be very clear, it has to be transparent. Number 2, there has to be a shared understanding between all partners. Ownership. I found that, and I'll give you an example, there was you all know MIT Poverty Action Lab, right? The JPAL group that does randomized control trials. So I was involved several years ago. They did something with an NGO called Seva Mandir in Udaipur, where they ran 2 RCTs. And one of those RCTs was based on their earlier experience with an education program, where they had something called a date time machine. Has any of you heard this before, the date time machine? No. So they had a date time machine where they would have the teacher stand in front of the blackboard with the children, take a picture of the camera, and it would be dated and timed. So it's 9 o'clock in the morning, 1st September, and the children are all there and the teacher's there. At the end of the class, there would be another picture with the children and the teacher, and based on that, the teacher was paid. And this was successful in improving teacher attendance. It didn't have any result on the performance of children, but it did improve teacher attendance. This is remote tribal areas in Rajasthan. So they decided based on this intervention that they would move it into the health sector. So they did it with ANMs. And what do you think happened? They put the daytime machine in the sub-center, and the ANM had to sit there at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day, the picture had to be taken. What do you think would have happened? ANM would be there at the beginning and the end, okay?
Fieldwork got affected. Fieldwork will be affected there, I think, in the afternoon or maybe in the evening. She will not be available for them.
Okay.
Those who are living in sub-centers.
Sorry?
Those ANMs who are living in sub-centers, I don't think we should be caring about that.
And this is a classic case of a research agency going into an implementation area. And although there are, these people are probably in line for the next Nobel Prize in economics. But you wonder at how come they did not even try and understand what the roles of an ANM were, because she said you can't do it 3 times a week. I'm out in the field motivating people for family planning. That's very much something that the ANM does. And so she's not sub-center based every day. She doesn't come to the sub-center every day. The second point was they, in their policy brief, and it's on their website also, in their policy brief, somehow they put it down to the fact it didn't work was because there was insufficient supervision. Which is strange, because you wonder how that supervision links to the ANMs being able to stay in that area. So this is what I mean by this whole thing about ownership. The system had absolutely no ownership of the daytime machine. So even if it was a way to improve, I mean, of course, I balk at the very thought of somebody taking a picture of a service provider and saying, okay, she was there in the morning and there in the afternoon. Leaving aside all of that, if you don't take people into confidence and say, this is what we're planning to do to strengthen you or to support you, there's really very little then implementation research is not going to work. And they were all about this. The second thing they did was to give women who brought their children for immunization grain. So every time the mother brought the baby for the immunization, which they held on a fixed day, they would give the mother some grain. At the end of all immunizations, they would give the mother a plate and some bowls, because it sort of said, okay, now you can do complementary feeding, which was a bit late in the day, but still it worked. But the system, although they showed in 1 year, they showed 18% increase in immunization coverage, the system still didn't take up this. Can any of you tell me why this did not move from that really good research that showed that yes, it could work, to a large scale system? 18% coverage immunization in a remote area in Rajasthan is really very, very good. Then we also have to look at clarity, and that's what I said, clarity on who is responsible for what phase of the research cycle. I think in terms of asking questions, and I am open to criticism on this, I think the question is asked by the implementer, because they are the ones on the ground, they know what is going on, maybe not. And then also aligning research funding with program needs. Implementation research is not like the other kind of research where you do it at the beginning of the program, at the end of the program. This is something that you have to think about as you begin. As we say in scaling up, you need to design scaling up even when you're thinking about the innovation. It's not that you do something on the ground, find it successful, and then say, okay, now let's talk about scaling up, because by then you've developed and designed processes that are really so intensive that it's hard to scale it up. So just like you design scalability when you design an innovation or a pilot, to also think about implementation research when you're undertaking the actual intervention itself. It's important to do that. It may not always happen, and then it doesn't align with funding cycles, so donors also have to be very much part of this process. And finally, the role of boundary organizations. In my experience, and I work in what is called a boundary organization, we are neither the implementers nor are we the researchers. What we are is a body that sits on the edge, that's able to look at implementation, but is also able to interact with researchers and be the bridge between implementers and researchers. And I think the role of boundary organizations in supporting scaling up or in doing implementation research is really very critical. Actually, it's not an agency, but a set of skills. Boundary organizations have to have a set of skills with them. It's not that, A or B, PHFI or NHSRC. And what would be the set of skills? It would be an understanding of implementation, it would be an understanding of research, without expertise in each, because they should be able to call upon a group, but they should have enough of an understanding. Advocacy, because they have to raise funds for what they do. It's also an understanding of the bigger context. So looking at policy issues and policy analysis, which practitioners on the ground may or may not have. So a set of skills are associated with boundary organizations, and having boundary organizations support implementation research is important. I'm sure most states will tell you that ownership of the system ownership of the ASHA by the system is problematic. And numbers are one threat, but then there are many others. And there's all this program theory that we had. There's an interesting evaluation of the ASHA program that's up on NHSRC's website, where we looked at why ASHAs perform better, and that was implementation research. Why ASHAs perform better in some states than in others. And it's, it's not to say that the ASHA program is doing well, but what are the factors that contributed to it? And we found that in Orissa and Assam, there was far better support. Their drug kits were there. The state owned up. The state said, we need ASHAs, we need our ASHAs, and our ASHAs are doing a great job. They did their trainings on time. They gave them their drug kits, support, supervision, non-monetary incentives. Whereas in Bihar and UP, there was just hardly any training. They didn't get their drug kits. And that's the difference. And that tells you, and our research actually focused on, we use the realist method, and we focused on trying to understand not just is the program working or not, but why and how. And we found that program managers were really the cause. Those who felt that ASHA should only be a link worker really said, no, why does she need training? All she needs to do is to bring people from the community into the health system. But there were those who felt that, our health system is not working, and therefore we need to give them skills, and that the program manager's perspective actually influenced the functioning of the ASHA on the field. And I would appeal to all the researchers who are all sitting on that side, and many of you here, to say, is study of organizations part of implementation research? Study of organizational mandates, work culture. Something tells me yes, because that determines how implementation happens. But what do you people think? Because it's a very important factor in implementation. Do organizations perform the roles they are supposed to perform? So for instance, ICMR or NIHFW for that matter, or remember, was it Kabir who asked,
When there was NIHFW, why was there need of NHSRC? And that's because these organizations don't perform their roles. Which is why I think we are seeing a plethora. By the way, how can we not mention in boundary organizations all the technical support units that donors are setting up? They're all boundary organizations. Yes, they're boundary organizations for the donor-funded interventions, but now donors are funding things at scale. 7 states, 7 districts, 25 districts. And those particular technical support units are boundary organizations. So the next one is, what are the approaches and methods for implementation research? Again, not a specific method. The wonderful thing about IR for me is that it's so multi-method oriented. You can draw from almost any method, and you can use a mixed method approach. You can combine many methods to get at the answers that you want. So there are several things here, and some of the things realist reviews you already know. You worked on it for a whole day. You have participatory action research this afternoon. There's two kinds of things: explanatory versus pragmatic trials. And explanatory trials are those trials that we do in a clinic setting, right? To figure out how one particular intervention works, more focused on a clinic setting. Pragmatic trials are those, the very word it is, the pragmatic, is to see how it works in outside settings. There are effectiveness implementation hybrid trials, which do them together, which look at the effectiveness of a particular model and then look at how to implement that in a large scale system. And one example that comes to mind, I think, is the Ekjut model. How many of you are familiar with the Ekjut model? Which is also a home-based newborn care kind of model. Using self-help groups and the PLA method, participatory learning and action, and to reduce neonatal mortality. And what they did was tried it out in certain areas in Jharkhand, but they were also able to inform and influence scaling up across Jharkhand. So now they are in 3 states, in Jharkhand, in Orissa, and Madhya Pradesh. So even while they were looking at the effectiveness of rolling this out through self-help groups in a larger context, they were able to take it across 3 states. And that's an interesting way of looking at implementation. And this hybrid method is also one way of studying implementation research. Then of course you have all this quality improvement studies. PDSA, does anyone know what PDSA means? So it's plan, do, study, act. And it's a cycle. You keep doing it, and it's very useful, particularly for quality improvement in clinical and hospital facilities. And NHSRC, we do something called an as-is study. So we go into a facility, we look at how things are there, and then we help them plan, we help them implement the reforms, then we study how it contributes to provider behavior, to outcomes, and then we try and institutionalize it within that facility and take it to other facilities. So PDSA is an approach, and now the government has taken it up into something that they call scoring and certification of facilities, and that's being scaled up. But that lends itself to quality improvement. And then mixed methods is both qualitative and quantitative. You can use qualitative, quantitative methods. But the two major principles of this are that the method has to be transparent and has to be able to yield evidence. It's not, and one of the things I think that some of us, particularly I know policymakers who sometimes don't have the patience with scientific methods and research, think that implementation research is just about, kind of an anecdotal thing. It isn't. It's actually, you have to be able to find the evidence that supports the anecdote or refutes the anecdote. It's not about just saying, oh, okay, 20 women said this and therefore this is going to work. That's not the way it's done. And that, I think, is fundamental to no matter what research method you choose. And the second thing is transparency to judge the process by which it was done and how the conclusion was reached. I think both of those are just as critical as it would be to any other research method. Implementation research cannot be free of those two, and those principles have to guide no matter what method you choose. Because you must have heard as well. I mean, generally people tend to think that implementation research is about going and saying, "Acha, ye nahi hua, so let's try different ways." And I think that's why too often what we call implementation research isn't, and that's why things fall by the wayside. And a classic example of that, I think, is the ICDS system. I've been fascinated by ICDS. It's a 35-year-old thing, and everybody, global literature you look at that says India was the first country to do this, and we do it at scale, and we have the largest feeding program in the world. We have 1.2 billion people, but it doesn't work. There are enough people to tell you ICDS doesn't work, and then year after year ICDS gets funding. Applying the implementation research lens to ICDS, if you will, has not really happened, and that's really quite puzzling, because, and I would wonder why not, but I think that because it represents this coalition of so many vested interests that nobody would even dare to do it, and even if they did, it would be quietly buried. There have been studies of ICDS, which is a point. I've pointed out everything that we've said. There are success stories in ICDS. Tamil Nadu, despite what Rakhal says and what I think, it's still a success story. You had a chief minister who wrote a letter, which is still preserved in WCD, I believe, when the government of India said to them that we'll only give you food from Monday to Friday. He said children's hunger knows no holidays. So there was a huge political push behind the ICDS program, which made it what it was. It may not be what we think it ought to be, but it's still a way better than any others. But applying the implementation research lens has not been done in ICDS, and I think it would greatly benefit from this. Despite the secular improvement in nutrition, we'll still have 20-25% in this country simply because of equity issues. So I think, so in terms of methods, that was what we had. The next one we have to think about, the great thing about implementation research is, it's the question that is the key. The question determines the methods and not the method determining the question. You have to first ask yourself, what is it that I want to learn about this particular intervention or set of interventions? And that's how you formulate your question. The second point is, it's not a question just thrown off randomly. It has to be built on some theoretical construct or around a particular framework. And why is that important? And I think Rakhal had in one of your, is it called the eHealth Digest that goes around? In which he said it's important to have a framework, not because it's the right thing to do, it looks nice in a publication, but it's important to have a framework simply so you can peg an argument around it or on it. And I think building on key frameworks, and of course you can develop your own framework, and I think Prasanna is going to talk about how you create new frameworks for implementation research, but there are several that exist. One is called the diffusion of innovation theory, which is Everett Rogers, which early on where he started about, and he talked about early adapters and late adapters, and what are the factors that make some laggards, why some innovations catch on quickly and move ahead, but why some don't. And that's one theory. The second is the scaling up management framework, which I worked on a lot, which says you can apply, you can ask the questions at every stage, from the time of the model to the components of the model, to the time you do the advocacy for it, do you do a stakeholder analysis, and then you take it to scale. Then the third is ExpandNet, which is a WHO framework, which also has a set of issues and questions around which you can build the question. Then there's something called CFIR, which is, this is an interesting one. CFIR has 5 major, which I really appeals to me, which you look at the model and you look at the model's characteristic. You look at the setting in which, so they have 2 settings. One is an inner setting, which is actually how the model was operated, or the intervention itself. So it's within a particular district, let's say a district in Odisha, they did a transport model. How did they resolve the fact that 108, which is touted across the country, didn't come to them at all? They simply, the district officers simply did a mapping of their districts and allocated vehicles to different parts of that mapping. And when we talked to them and we said, what a wonderful innovation, they looked a bit surprised and said, really? Because they looked at it as something that they had planned for their district to address the issue of emergency transport. So that's the inner setting. How the organization behaves and who are the people in it who behave that certain way. And then there's an outer setting, which is perhaps the state and its policies. So the CFIR framework I find is an interesting framework on how you formulate a question. Then there's something called RE-AIM, which is researching, effectiveness, adequacy, and I don't know what the I stands for, but the M is maintenance or sustainability, because in implementation research, something we are concerned about is sustainability of the implementation itself. It requires, of course, you need to be very clear what your research objective is, and that the question then determines the methods in the study, and that's your exercise which you're going to do. So we won't spend much time on this. That's it.